Welcome. My name is Marie Ashway. I'm the Director of Marketing at Mainline, and thrilled to have you all here today to learn a little bit about Ansible and enjoy and learn some about some great whiskeys from Ranger Creek Distillers in San Antonio, Texas.
Thanks, Marie, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. We're delighted to have you here. You know, Mainline's been a Red Hat partner since the early 2000s, for a long, long time, long before the IBM acquisition. And we are seeing a real increase in interest from our customers on Ansible. And part of the reason for that is there are so many use cases for Ansible. And so that's the whole purpose of today's session, obviously to have a little bit of fun, to learn a little bit about whiskey, but also perhaps to learn a little bit about Ansible and the various use cases, be it networking or storage or security or lots of the other things we're going to talk about. And I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce James Marsnick. James is a systems engineer on our professional services team with Mainline, and he's going to take us through a few thoughts relative to use cases for Ansible. And let me see if I can, hey Marie, you need to enable me to share my screen, please.
Okay, Jim, give me 2 seconds.
So James, bear with me 1 sec while I bring up this screen so that your charts show, and we'll be back with Mike in just a few minutes.
Okay, Jim, you're set.
Thanks, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let me just say a quick word before James gets started. So this is the raffle prize du jour. It is a really cool, no pun intended, maybe the pun is intended, a really cool cooler, a soft-sided cooler, branded with Mainline, of course, for the summer. So that's what we're going to be raffling off. So if you use your webcam and be involved in the chat, be involved with your voice, you'll be entered into the raffle, and we'll be pulling that raffle at 5:30 today. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Jim.
All right.
Go ahead, James.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And welcome to the event. I'm glad everybody can come. My name's James Marsnick. I'm a systems engineer with Mainline. I've been here for 15 years. A little background about myself. I've been in the IT field since the late 1990s. And through that time in my career, I've gained expertise and certifications on multiple operating systems, Unix, Linux, Windows, networking, storage, virtualization, and probably others I forgot. So that makes me a great generalist, I think. And that's one of the reasons why I love Ansible. I can just use it for everything. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the capabilities of Ansible. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what Ansible and Ansible Tower is. And then we'll finish up with a few use cases, and then you guys can get back to the whiskey tasting. So if you could change the next slide for me. So as you can see here, what can Ansible do? For me, it's more like what can it do? From things like orchestration, Ansible can define infrastructure once and use it wherever and however you need. When it comes to configuration management, Ansible is designed to be minimal. In nature, it's consistent, secure, reliable, and extremely easy to use. From the app deployment standpoint, Ansible allows you to deploy multi-tiered applications reliably and consistently from one common framework. Its simple task descriptions make it easy to read and react over time. So it makes doing repetitive tasks very easy. So when we're looking at the provisioning capabilities, Ansible can provision the latest cloud platforms, virtualized hosts, hypervisors, network, and bare metal servers, and storage as well. So it's great for that application for deploying virtual machines from templates, bare metal. So when it comes to the next level, continuous integration and continuous development, Ansible provides a true multi-tier, multi-step orchestration capability that is push-based and allows for very fine-grained control over operations. And when it comes to security and compliance, Ansible allows you to simply define your system security using easily understood playbook syntax. Ansible comes with a library of over 750 automation modules, which allows you to quickly perform tasks without complicated scripting. If you would change to the next slide, please.
James, can I ask you a question on that slide there?
Sure. I might have missed that. I saw a bubble and I was
Nope, I just unmuted. That's all. For that top row, and it says do these, are those all different modules?
No, it would be how you design your playbooks to make them run. You know,
Okay.
if I'm deploying a VMware from template, I would include the VMware module to call out the VMware community guest collections to make sure I could get the right module so I could perform the activities that I want to do. The guest module allows me to define a virtual machine from template, specify memory, do post configurations and things like that. So it really depends on how you want to get it done. But in each case, you might be using the same modules for your particular point of work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay. So Jim, if we go to the next page, I'm not going to say too much about this. This is simply a range of areas that Ansible has use cases for. And as you can see, I would be hard pressed to find anybody in the audience that isn't using at least one of these or more. So Ansible really has a broad range of use cases. Okay, could we go to the next slide? So what is Ansible? The foundation of everything is the Ansible engine. It gets installed on the server that's going to be used to run playbooks. And the Ansible engine provides a command line interface, which allows users to run their playbooks, which call modules and plugins at the targeted inventory. Now, whether this is the private or public cloud, hosts, network devices, and storage, Ansible can perform those kind of capabilities. Now, I would like to mention here that there's also an icon up the top that mentions the CMDB, Configuration Management Database. I highly advise you to consider this, using this, as it's an important aspect once you start on the journey for infrastructure as code, because you want to keep and maintain that code safe in its changes. So can you go to the next slide, please? So now we're talking about Ansible Tower, which adds an additional framework onto Ansible, which organizations really need. Provides a GUI, a simple user interface with typical role-based access controls for administrators, users, projects, playbooks, organizations, and other things. You can schedule your templates, your jobs, and your workflow through a centralized interface. And Ansible Tower also provides integration with Red Hat's cloud, with the Automation Hub and analytics. So Ansible Tower interacts with Ansible Engine through the Tower API, which then calls the open source modules and plugins and code, and accesses and remotely executes things on your desired inventory through secure transports such as SSH, WinRM, and Network CLI. So again, it shows you use cases. It's really how your playbooks are designed, of how you want to use aspects. Like for security and compliance, you might have playbooks or roles simply focusing on those. Provisioning might be a workflow template where you provision a VM, do some post customization, which might be including running some of those security templates to get to that desired end state that you want. So if we could go to the next tab, this page shows a list of Ansible certified automation partners. And this is a small list, and the list is always growing. These vendors are actively contributing to the Ansible community with collections and whatnot. So this allows you to accelerate the adoption of it because you don't have to make it yourself. You just take advantage of what's out there from these vendors and put it into practice. Okay, let's move to the use cases. So I wanted to provide a few simple playbooks so you could look at them and take a look at them and see how easy they are to read. In the network use cases, I have 3 playbooks. The top right screen is one that configures a banner on network switches. It's very simple. And somebody might say, well, I can do that. It's a few switches or whatnot. But what happens if you have a lot of switches? Then that's really where the item potency and the reusability of this code is. Very usable to see and read. You're calling a module called iOS banner, and it's taking some input and you're filling in the text. And at the bottom, you're declaring that I want this present, which once you run it, Ansible is going to go make it do what you're telling it to do. So the next test case is a Cisco ASA playbook that I created, which does some simple firewall testing. It's calling the ASA command module. It's doing a simple show version. Then it's showing ASP drops in memory. And then it's doing some pings to a known IP address and responds back. So again, a simple test. Once it runs, it can be run multiple times, and you can, if you wanted to run it against different firewalls, you could simply either include them or copy a job and make changes to target the different hosts. And finally, on this page, we have an example of backing up Cisco switches. It has 2 tasks in there, and both of them are using, the first one's using the iOS command module, and the second one is really being triggered by a register option called config. And that's really going down into the content and putting all that output into a file in a central place. So again, this could be run on all the switches that you desire, and it will put a unique name for you to keep those things separated. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. So this slide talks about a use case with Windows. I'm not sure if people have seen a lot of Windows playbooks. I thought it would be fairly nice to include it. In this playbook, I actually created these very short order in my lab. One of them has 2 plays or tasks in it, and they basically call the Community Windows Win DNS record module. The first play sets an A record, and the second one does the reverse address record. Now, I'm sure there might be some confusing syntax in there if you see the little squiggly brackets, but that's just a simple way to define variables, and it makes things idempotent and reusable. If you look up into the top right corner, you'll see a screenshot of a job template that I used this playbook on, where I filled out these variables that you can match up inside the playbook and specified an entry that I wanted to add. And just like I mentioned earlier, if I wanted to do another job and add a host entry or something, I could easily copy that job, make changes to the variables, change and run the job, and it will add those entries. As an alternative, say this use case for like operations, if you didn't feel comfortable with your operators filling in this information, the second option would be to create surveys, which basically when you execute a job template, it will pop up with questions. You fill out the question and fill in with the information, and it will feed it to the playbooks. So quite handy. And the last playbook is another DNS. I had one more thing on that other slide, Jim.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
Yeah,
I almost did it myself too. I almost said it myself. I just wanted to keep that extra variable tied to the first playbook. The last playbook just defines a C name, a canonical name, into DNS. And again, I'm using variables. So once it's defined, I can reuse it and put it into play real quick. Now, if you would move forward to my last slide. Thank you. So this last use case that I have is consists of 2 playbooks, and in the middle is a screenshot of Ansible Tower's workflow visualizer for orchestration. And the playbook on the right is simply a Red Hat patching and reboot. If you look at it, upgrade all packages, defining the module that I'm using a wildcard in there, and I want them at the latest. And the next task, I'm going to reboot that server, those servers that I'm targeting in the inventory. On the right side, I'm using something similar, but in this case, I'm doing it for Windows. I'm doing some Windows checks and capturing the state of those checks. And then based upon the categories, I'm telling to perform those updates. And the last task will perform a Windows reboot in the event that a reboot is required to finish that, to complete that update. So if you look in the center of the screen is these 2 playbooks in my lab, I've created a workflow. Simply I patch my first DNS server, and when it completes, I kick off other patching to other systems, Windows and Linux. And then when I'm done with those, I will patch my second DNS server. Now, I kept this simple because I wouldn't have had a big enough screen to put everything in, but please conceptualize how you would do this in your life cycle, right? You might have different life cycle environments, but within those life cycle environments, you may have different groups of servers. By using something like Ansible Tower, it would not only allow you to just do, say, your Linux updates, but you could also orchestrate up as an enterprise your Windows and other OS distributions that are supported with Ansible as well. So these are the end of my use cases. I am going to turn this over to Marie for Q&A, and I want to thank you for your time today and enjoy your whiskey.
Thank you, James. Really appreciate that. So it's a lot of information in a short period of time, but we didn't want to bombard everybody with too much detail. Obviously, you could certainly come and have more conversation with us at any time to further dig into more of this interesting Ansible functionality and use cases. So I've got a couple of other questions here that people actually have been texting me, and these have probably been from mainline people because they know my phone number, which is fine. And somebody is asking if a repository is required with Ansible.
Well, that is a good question. And as I mentioned earlier, with a configuration management database, it is a best practice to use a repository. It's somewhat of a change for some people that don't have a development background, but it's a very important component for continuous integration and continuous development. Collaborating, checking in, checking out code, vetting out the process, and helping out the agility factor. I would highly recommend it.
Okay, super, thank you. And another question that was sent in someone is looking for the requirements. Let me tell you what it is. What are the requirements for Ansible on Windows?
Excellent question. If anyone is unaware of it, Ansible does not require an agent. And how Ansible works with Windows is basically you have to have PowerShell 3 or higher, and you have to enable WinRM. Once that's done, it is quite easy to start scheduling operations on Windows systems with Ansible.
All right.
I see a question. Considering a configuration management database, yes, Git, SVN, CVS if you're back that day, or Subversion, but yeah, Git is very common.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for James before we flip back over to Mr. Mike for some more whiskey tasting?